Welcome everyone to another episode of the Terrain Studio. I'm your host, Sean Morris. Today on the Terrain Studio, we're actually going to be continuing with our scratch build series. If you recall back to when I first initially was working on this piece, I showed you how to cut or build in some of the more attractive features of this piece here. So we did this sort of end door style venting here, some of these exhaust and fan ports, as well as this recessed panel. For the purposes of this video here, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of continue working along. I'm just going to show you how to do some A modulation and some weathering effects on this piece. So just to catch you up from when we ended to where we are, obviously it looks a little bit different. I've gone ahead and added in a few of the extra bits and bobs, and I talked about doing that just to add some more focal points and some areas of interest in these otherwise flat areas here. So I just used a vehicle hatch here, added some sandpaper in to create this sort of grid or vent, maybe a pipeworks type feature. I've obviously added in this small pipe here. This is just done with some plastic card rod and then some tube that's cut to create the couplings or the attachment points for the piping itself. Obviously a small control mechanism here just glued on for an area of interest. A small control panel here that's off another GW bit and pieces. This is from Pegasus Hobby Kit. It was from their, I think it's like nuclear plant or plant works. These are obviously supposed to be attached together. However, I've just flattened them out and just cut off the tabs to lay them in here just for a little bit of interest. The very first thing what we're going to do, and I'm going to do this off camera just because it's a lot easier in the airbrush booth, is I'm going to go ahead and start modulating this out. So I've gray primed this, and while it was drying, what I did is I took a foam brush and I sort of stippled a few places just to break up the real smooth look of these panels. The more sort of features I can add to the flat paneling, the easier it's going to be to create some unique looks in the weathering stage. So I've just gray primed this out. I just used standard gray primer Rust-Oleum. I used the 2x ultra coverage. I use a matte finish. Typically I'll just use matte. I try to avoid satins and glosses. But next what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with some Vallejo Air, and I'm just going to give this a 3-color modulation. So for the purposes of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray from this direction here in the airbrush booth. So I'm going to leave the shadow bits on the bottom sides here. So we'll have a natural shadow with these vents here, but I'm going to spray down in this direction. Then what I'll do is I'll lighten it up with a couple drops of white. I'll do the second layer, and then I'll go to a subsequently lighter shade of gray just for the third layer. So I'll do that off camera, and then we'll come back. It will have a little dry time, so what I'll do is I'll indicate kind of the approximate amount of time between each step. We'll try to reduce the internet magic in the videos as always. However, just for the purposes of making sure that you guys have full transparency in terms of what steps and how long they take, I'll kind of indicate the dry times. But when we do come back after the next step, what we'll do is we're going to start applying some wash. We're going to use a gray wash. We'll apply that. We'll have to let that dry as well. And then I'm going to come in with the white spirits. So if you've just watched the Hobby Shop episode 1, you'll notice that I've picked up some AK Interactive products, and I talked about using them in the tutorials. Here's the tutorial. So it's a straight translation from what I'm getting, what I'm intending to use things for, and then the application. So I'm doing it in 2 videos so that I can avoid talking about the products specifically in the videos, just to shorten the time of the tutorials. So if you're looking for that product information, go watch the Hobby Shop series. If you're looking for the application techniques and sort of the direct application of the products themselves, the tutorials will be the place to look. So I encourage you to watch both, but if you're looking for a distinction between just learning about the product and learning how to apply it, that will be the distinction that happens in the videos. So I'm going to jump into the airbrush booth, and then we'll come back and get to step 2. Okay, so now we're back for the second part. Basically what's occurred off camera is I've gone ahead in with the airbrush, and I've modulated out the panel. So I've just used a series of gray paints, obviously a little bit lighter than the primer coat. I've worked from this direction. I've sort of spot highlighted up a few of the panels, and it's pretty subtle. I didn't go for an extreme modulation by any means. We're really going to play with the tones and add in some weathering effects to really kind of change the overall look, but I wanted to create a little bit of shadow, a little bit of recess here and there, but primarily we're going to achieve the modulation with the wash. For this, what we're doing is we're using an AK Interactive product. This is an enamel wash. It's called Brown Blue, and it's designed for Panzer Gray. So this is obviously a little bit lighter than a Panzer Gray, but overall it will work for this this color. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that on camera here, that I get something that's a little bit okay to get messy, I guess. So I'm just going to swap that out, put the green panel underneath here, and I'll paint right on here. So I'm going to give this a good shake. We're going to go ahead and start putting this on. Now you're going to see that the application technique that I use for this is going to be pretty sloppy. I'm really going to flood most of the panels, and you can kind of see the color of that potentially, and it's quite green as a matter of fact. So I'm just going to go ahead and dip this in, and then I'm going to start flooding out all of the panels. So you can see there's definitely no huge skill in terms of the application. Just kind of putting it down, slopping it over everything. And we're going to go ahead and leave this for some time, and I'll kind of indicate how long we'll leave this for when we come back with the next part. So I realize it's exceptionally shiny on camera. I'm going to attempt to lift this up a little bit higher so you guys can kind of see, you know, that's just literally slopped on there. It's covering everything. I'm just going to move around some of the pools to get a little bit of movement here, and I'm fine with it kind of pooling up down in the recesses, panels. We're going to do some work with this. Obviously, that's not going to be the final color, nor will it be the overall concentration. We're just really using this to lay our base layer. With this wash right here, we're going to actually come in and use the white spirits. This is going to be in the next step, and the white spirits we're going to use in a flooding action to actually go in and retract or dilute a lot of what we've put down here. So I'm not sure if you guys can see it on camera already, but it's actually starting to dry away in some of these areas, and it's revealing the base green, the base gray color is starting to protrude through this green wash, and the more this dries, obviously the more prominent the gray will be. These hot and cold spots that we've created with the flooding is going to just add to the modulation that we've already created. So and then what we'll do with the white spirits is we'll panel paint, in terms of panel paint the white spirits on to actually reduce the color a little bit more. But we can leave it in the recesses around the pipes. We can certainly leave it in around this grate here, around the venting, around these fan flaps here, and down in the actual V-shaped exhaust vent here. Then what we'll do subsequently is we'll come back in with the weathering effects, and we'll start adding some streaking grime. You know, we'll run some grime and some rust down from these onto, you know, these pipes below. I'll show you how to do condensation on pipes as well, and we're going to do a little bit of water, simulated water effects in terms of, I was thinking about putting some green slime coming out of this port, but we're going to do the green slime with hot glue, and I'm going to show you how to use hot glue to kind of create some thicker sort of water type effects. Water effects are great, however, they typically work best when you're pooling them. However, this would be a wall panel, so to have any sort of a buildup and then streaking down the panel itself is going to require a little bit of a more viscous material. And not only that, we're going to want to make sure that we don't get a lot of excess dripping. So the hot glue will give us a little bit more control, allow us to sort of shape out the water effect, if you will. In this case, it's going to be a sludge effect, a little bit more controlled. So we'll wait for this to dry, we'll come back, and then we'll start getting into some of those things that I've talked about. So stay tuned. Okay, so we've had about an hour or so to let this enamel wash sort of soak in and penetrate our piece, and you're going to notice two distinct or contrasting segments here. This piece here, I've actually gone ahead and pulled the wash off, and I did that just A, to show you kind of where we're going to get to, and two, just to save up a little bit of time. So I'm gonna go in and wash using the white spirits some panels of this just to kind of show you the process. However, I'll then finish that up off camera and bring us back for the next segment. But I wanted to show you that this is kind of what we're going to reacquire or re-achieve here. So you're going to notice, or perhaps it's not as evident on the camera, but there's still some of the green tingish tones of the wash here. It has a very dirty look, far less dirty than obviously this here, but far dirtier than our initial modulated color. We're going to go in and wash this with a dark ink as well, sort of a dark gray, just to kind of give it, again, a little bit more depth and some tones. However, I really like the dirty look that this wash achieves. So for the process of getting back to this, what you need is some white spirits, just in a small mixing cup here. And you're going to want to make sure you decant out your white spirits into a cup, because as you are applying and moving your brush back and forth, you're going to put some of the green wash back in here. So you don't want to be coming directly out of the bottle. Otherwise, you're going to contaminate your bottle with whatever color wash you have. So you're going to decant out what you think you need. If you need more, obviously, you can put some more out. I've just thrown a bunch in the cup here. I probably won't use all of this, but just for the interest of giving you a little bit of a demonstration, I thought I'd go ahead and put some in here so you could actually see what's going on. I may actually just put this into a much smaller container and just use it as needed. One of the advantages of kind of decanting a bit is that you don't have to constantly keep washing your brush, because obviously you don't want to put it into the container, like I said, with any of the wash on it. So let's go ahead and just start pulling off some paint. So you can use either a flat brush or a pointed tip brush, whatever you want. You don't want to use anything really small because you're going to be doing a lot of flooding, and you want to get some substantial amount of liquid from the cup onto the actual surface. So I'm going to go ahead and use this flat one. This is what I've been using. I'm going to put a bunch in here, and then I'm just going to actually just start saturating the panel. I'm just going to do this this vent here first, just to just start showing you the magic. And it is kind of like a magical step, actually. So I'm just going to rotate this a little bit so I have a little bit better viewpoint. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start coming in and just moving your brush along and pulling your liquid off. I keep a paper towel handy, and that just allows me to take out the ink. Otherwise, I'm going to be pushing around a lot of ink. And I'm just lightly stroking this. I'm not trying to put a lot of brush strokes in. I'm just moving it along. You'll notice as your white spirits starts to sort of diffuse off, or rather evaporate off, you're going to have more and more of the green pigment showing through. So some spots it's okay. You might want to leave a little bit here and there. Other spots you may want to go back in and just reflood with some white spirits, and that will help pull the excess off. So you can see there relatively quickly I've definitely redefined that area. I'm going to go in here and just lightly pull some out of the recessed panels here. more of the venting. I'm going to be a little less interested in pulling it from the outside edges because I'm fine with that staying dark. In fact, I'll be putting more ink in here anyway, and that will likely reflood and darken in those recesses. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull just a little bit out so you can see how I've left this darker than the surrounding area. So let's go ahead and put some more white spirits in here. What I'm going to do off camera is I'm just going to continue to do the exact same technique. I'm going to go ahead and flood this area, pull it all back off, and get it all to this sort of dirty gray tone. And then we're going to come back in and do the next layer, which will be applying a dark gray ink over the entirety of the model as well. So stay tuned for that part. Okay, so now we've had an opportunity to allow the enamel wash and the white spirits to kind of do their interactions. I'm not worried about the cleanliness. A few white spots here and there, just where like I said, there's a little bit of reaction between adhesive, white spirits, all of that. This is a really dirty, grungy process, and as such, each layer allows for a little bit of allowance of, let's say, error correction. And it's not necessarily error correction, it's just you're not going to get, each step is not going to be, you're not trying to achieve the final look in a single step. And I think that's really important with terrain making, that people have to be willing to go through a process to arrive at a final result. So let me just lift this up a little bit closer. And there's still going to be a few little wet spots here and there. Again, I always sort of speed through the process, so this hasn't been drying an overly long period of time. A little bit of heat helps speed up the process, but you can really see that the panel's got a lot of depth to it now. You know, particularly some dark spots in here, the venting, the grate, a little bit here at the fins, but we're using the natural shadows to help us there. And I left some of the extra little bits and pieces a little bit dirtier than the panels. So that's kind of where we are right now. What I want to do, sort of to unify this and to sort of get it back to a little bit of a gray tinge, is I want to do a flood wash over the entirety of this. So what I'm using for that is I'm actually using a Vallejo light gray wash. This is not an enamel, so this is an acrylic based wash, basically a water-based product as opposed to the enamel. I'm just going to go ahead and decant some of this into the little cup here. I'm not diluting this at all. I'm going to go in with sort of a flat brush. You can see the brushes are kind of getting a little bit beaten up with the terrain making, so don't use expensive brushes for really anything that I show you. So you save those for the painting tutorials and the real professionals who know what they're doing. But let's go in and just grab some of this. Again, just saturating this brush. I'm getting it right down in the fennel. I'm not attempting to preserve this brush in any way, but I'm going to go ahead and just start popping this down over the surface of the panel here. And I'm just going to go ahead and just flood out a bunch of spots. And then I'll start moving this around here, putting it down. You know, like I said, a few of those white spots, I'm not worried as I build up this this ink and the rust effects and the streaking grime and the water effects and the chipping and the stippling and probably some of the pigments. By the time we get all said and done, there's going to be lots of opportunity to sort of make this thing into a real true disaster. Alright, I think that gets us a fair amount of ink out there. So I'm just going to rotate this way just for working purposes, and I'm going to start moving and flooding the blank spaces out here. I want to get this into all of the crevices on the entirety of the model. I do not care where it pools, as long as I have covered all of the model. Paying particular attention to where I would want to have some pooling. So obviously down in the venting, along the panel lines, you know, in the recesses here around this, as I'm calling it, sort of this pipeworks opening. It kind of looks like a sewer opening to me, so let's just pretend that it is. It's going to have some sort of weird oozing liquid come out of it in the end, because I just think that it would be neat to have some ooze here and then drip down perhaps near or around that pipe in that control panel. Okay, so now we truly have a very dark, reestablish the gray, and just pooling paint wherever we, or ink rather, wherever we like. And what I'm gonna do is quickly do some absorption on this. So I'm just gonna leave this on camera, and we're gonna run real time here. So I'll probably just speed this process up in the actual footage. But what I'm going to do is just leave this to set in for a minute or two. I'm going to use a little bit of heat. That's why I'm going to speed up the camera so you don't have to hear the heat gun going. I'm going to try to bake in a little bit of this, and then I'm going to pull up the excess using a paper towel. And I like a paper towel for a couple reasons. One, it really prevents any brush strokes. Two, the absorption rate is random enough to give kind of a unique pattern, almost a patterned effect to the wall itself. And you really see how that sort of plays in with the modulation and the light-dark contrast that we're trying to achieve in this panel. So enjoy the footage, and then we'll come back and kind of see where we're at, and then start talking about next steps. Right, guys, welcome back. I've switched the camera angle here just to make it a little bit easier from here on out. So obviously we're losing the overhead image, but I am going to kind of have it under close cam here and work. Typically I'll do multi-camera angles, but for this one I think that just being close is probably going to be sufficient for the work that we need to finish up. So just bringing you up to speed with what I have done, I've come ahead and added in the initial rust look here. So you'll see that I have some pigment buildup, a little bit of the red rust tinge added here into the fan vents. I wanted to show you what the dry look looked like before going ahead and doing the application, because the wet look versus the dry look is considerably different. So this is what we're going to achieve, and we're actually going to, just for the purposes of this segment, we're going to work on this small section down here. I will go ahead and add in the rust effect, at least the initial stage, after this off camera. Then we'll come back, we'll do the second stage, or you'll see the second stage done on one section, and then we'll build up. So I'm going to kind of be one step ahead, working, and then we'll catch up in the segments. That'll just allow me to kind of show you both application and drying. You'll also notice that I've gone ahead and added in this initial sort of water effect, and I did this with super glue. So what we have here is a little bit of pooling. I've extended that down. It's a little bit free flowing, but it's also adhered, and then there's a little bit down on this control panel, and we'll go ahead and add color into that a little later on. So I think it gives it a nice little interesting focal point here, and just gives you an idea of what you guys can do with super glue, hot glue, in terms of forming some water effect. So like everything else, this is really, really simple. We're going to go ahead and add some rust effect in here. If you watch my hobby shop segment, you notice that I talked about pigments and the application of pigments. I'm going to show you how to put pigments down in two different ways. First, we're going to do it the dry method. Then we're going to go and resaturate and highlight, and solidify in with a pigment binder, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually apply the pigment over top of the pigment binder. So in a way, it's kind of three applications. But to do this, what we're going to do is, instead of using a rust pigment, I'm actually using this Vallejo pigment here, and it's called Burnt Sienna, and it's got a real cool rust effect, or rust-like color. Here is the two washes that we're going to use. One is light rust. Sorry, they're both light rust. That's I grabbed the wrong bottle. That's fine. We'll grab the other one. We're supposed to be using a heavier rust. So we have one light rust and then the burnt sienna, and then we'll use a little bit of a darker rust color. So that's just my bad, but that's fine. We'll work with these two anyway, and then the other one was just going to be a redundant process. But what we'll do is we'll start with this, and then in the second stage, like this one up here, this is when we'll actually go in and use this for streaking. So we're not going to do this in this part, but just to kind of give you a heads up of where we're going. So let's just open up this, and I typically just tap out a little bit into the lid. I don't usually take it out of the bottle. Same thing, I don't want to contaminate the bottle itself. I'm using this this brush here. It's kind of lost its point, so it's great for feathering. If you're doing this, I would again advise not using a great brush, or at least not a new one anyway. So we're going to go ahead and get some of the pigment here, build it up onto the brush, and then we're going to go ahead and start applying it. So I'm pretty lucrative with where I put it. In fact, I want to make this panel particularly rusty, and I'm just going to go ahead and, I'm moving my brush all around in different directions. So obviously this is going to not be the most pleasant thing on the brush, because I'm kind of moving it in different directions. I'm going to build up a little bit here in the corner. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start pulling that out and along. Just moving it in different directions. So we're going to do quite a heavy rusting on this panel. So you can see the color has already significantly changed. It's giving this piece a nice contrast, breaking up the gray. And you can envision that something that's putting out some condensation, like an exhaust vent, would likely have some rust buildup. So you can see it's not super dark in every location. You got a little bit of the gray shining through, and that's what we want. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just actually, I'll leave that because I'm going to need that in a second. I'm going to then transition right away into grabbing some pigment binder. So what I'm using here, sorry, my reach, I'm using some Vallejo pigment binder, and this is an acrylic medium here. So like I said, you can use different pigment binders. I have used AK stuff. In fact, we have some pigment fixer here. So this is an AK one, and this is a Vallejo one. And this is a little bit thicker. This pigment fixer here by AK is a little bit thinner. I'm actually going to use the medium. It's a little, like I said, it's a little bit more of a thick material. And the reason I want that is because I actually want to have it not flow through the small cracks between this grate. The thin stuff would run right through. I actually want to have a little bit of a buildup on the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and actually brush this across the entirety of the vent. And again, I've decanted some of this into a container. Obviously, I don't want to be dipping my brush back into either the pigment or the pigment fixer. And some will be called fixers, some will be called binders. So if I interchange the words, this is actually called a binder, and the other one's actually called a fixer. Oops, and that was just me getting some on there. So I'll just brush that off with my hand, and we'll move that around later on. Okay, so we're just brushing this along. And I'm going to build up a little bit in the corners. There we go. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry a second and just let that saturate in. I'm just going to dry up around the edges. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shift over to just a fine brush. It's more of a dry brush. It's a little bit of a flat tip. Make sure it's dry. Make sure it doesn't have any moisture in it at all. I'm going to go in and get the dry pigment. If you can see here, I'll use my finger to kind of show you. So I got a little bit of pigment on there. Pick up a bit more so it's evident. Then what I like to do is I like to go right above where I am working, and I like to just sort of tap off my brush. And this creates a little bit of stippling effect, but it also builds up the rust in a few strategic locations. So if you are careful or random, however you like to put it down, you can really control the look. And it's okay if it gets a little bit thicker or thin. I want to build up a corner, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually drop that right in to this corner. There we go. And again, I'm just building that up pretty thick. I'm just going to... Right. So now we have a pretty substantial pile of rust. This is going to dry out. And I'm just going to pull this a little bit. And again, I'm using the one with the binder, and so it's getting a little bit of the dry stuff saturated. So this will dry up and will give us a nice effect. So you can see kind of the wet versus dry. So obviously when it's dry, more of the powder shows and a little less of the moisture or the binding agent. It will also dull down and it won't have this shine. So that's pretty much the first step. Now, if you're happy with that and you don't want to build up your rust anymore, or you kind of like the more subtle look, it's perfectly fine to stop at this point. However, what we're going to do is we're going to add some streaking effects. So we're going to pick out these rust points here, and then we're going to actually pull that down. So this piece right here, you know, just needs a little bit of streaking rust coming down. Obviously, these big locations, a little bit streaking down here, and it's just going to tie in the overall look. We're going to go in and add some rust, obviously, to these pipes, a little bit here around this extra rim, and then we're going to pull down some of that with the streaking effect. And I'll show you how to do the streaking effect, of course. So when I come back in the next segment, basically all the rust effect will be done over the entirety of the model, and then we'll get going with the streaking effects. So stay tuned, guys. All right, guys, so welcome back. We can see here that we have some significant rust now added to our piece. So I just continued that exact process that I talked about in the previous step. We worked on this here, I had that done, but I just kind of continued that pattern throughout the entirety of the model. What I did is on the flat panels, I just used the dry dusting technique here. So I didn't apply pigment fixer over the flats. I did, however, do it anywhere there was a ridge or a corner. So specifically up here around this pipe works, around the pipe itself, in and around the control panel. I applied a little bit of pigment fixer. I did the dusting effect or the flicking effect just to achieve different looks. And so you can see that we have very hot and cold spots in terms of, and when I refer to hot and cold, I mean sort of a density of the pigment versus a lighter dusting of the pigment itself. So what we're going to do now, before we get into the streaking, before we get into the grime, the moss, and all those sort of things, what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of chipping. So I'll typically do this after the rust because I want to use the chipping to sort of dilute some of the rusting effect. So perhaps you have a heavy buildup of rust, but eventually it gets to a point where it starts flaking and exposing the bottom layers. So surface rust is very common. So what we're going to basically do is add chipping on top of the surface rust to kind of indicate a heavier level of decay or erosion. So for this, what I use is makeup sponges. Now you can certainly use sponges from like packing material, from miniatures, or if you have any sort of foam packing material. Basically what you're looking to do is have some sort of irregular shape to apply your sponge, your pigment. I also can just tear off the chunks and use these. Oftentimes what I'll do is actually take a toothpick. I'll take off the bit that I ripped, I will glue it onto the end of my toothpick, and I just basically make an applicator. So that's just a really simple tool that you can use, and you can basically just use a bunch of toothpicks, very low cost, efficient item. I'm just going to use the sponge for now just because I can get a little bit more control with this, and then I'm just going to apply it in different areas and then stipple that over. So what we're going to do for this is I use a couple different colors. Primarily what I like to use is a color called anthracite gray, and I like anthracite gray because it's almost a black, but it's not quite a black. I find that a black shows up to be a little bit too contrasting, specifically when you have other lighter grays around. So I use anthracite because it's a nice contrast between the gray, and it kind of gives me that darker color. We will actually add some black pigment later to achieve our black effect or our black color. But for this purposes, or for the purpose of this, we're just going to use some of the anthracite. So I'm going to go ahead and get it absorb all of that onto my to my sponge, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come in. I'm just going to do another small piece just for the purpose of this step, and then we'll do the rest off camera. So let's come in around this this pipe work. So what I'm going to do again, just to kind of explain in the tutorial, I'll work on different sections for each part of this, just so they can kind of get a sense of the different surfaces, the different application techniques, and just kind of exactly how you can apply those techniques to different surfaces. Because you may have a vent, you may have a grate, you may have sort of a building adornment that you're working on, you may have a panel, that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to kind of rotate the techniques around. So let's go in and work on this this panel. So obviously when you're applying the chipping, you want to pick areas that would likely see some chipping. So I'm going to go around this upper corner right here, and I'm just going to come in and just start just dabbing it on. And it doesn't really matter how thick or light you get it. So hopefully you guys can see that. I just have, you know, a little bit of dark, a little bit of light, and I'm just going to continue kind of going around and adding the chipping effect. So I'm going to focus in around this corner. My hand's going to be in the way a little bit. My apologies. And it's just a very, very subtle effect. And we'll build this up with a little bit of additional application in subsequent steps, but I'm just going to get a bit more of this. I'm going to dab it onto a different spot just to get a different application ability. And then I'm just going to hit some flats here. Just going to go a bit heavier up in this corner. There we go. Okay, so like I said, it's very subtle, but you can kind of see that we've had some discoloration in here. So we've darkened down the panel, we've taken a little bit of the rust away, and we're starting to get a little bit of a darker tone here. What I'm also going to do though is I'm going to add some bright tones. And so for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab another piece of foam. And for this, I'm actually going to go in with some Vallejo Air Steel color. So this is going to be very much a chrome like color. Now this is going to pop and be exceptionally bright in comparison to everything else. This will get toned down in subsequent steps. So if it looks a little bright, don't panic. We will certainly do some work around it. And what I want to do is I want to go back into very similar places that I've put the anthracite. Except for this, I'm going to do about half the number of touches. So I'm certainly not going to apply it in the same fashion. I'm going to focus primarily on raised edges. So a little less on the flats and a little bit more on the corners and places I can add some raised look. So let me just rotate the piece and you can start to see that that shine effect is showing up here and there. So if we back this off a little bit, it's quite subtle. It's definitely going to be built up a little bit more in prominence as we get this over the entirety of the piece. But that's really simply all you have to do. Just grab a little bit of foam, just touch it here and there. You're not looking to paint out any panels. You're not looking to put large specks. You're looking to hit some corners, have a little bit of stippling, have a little bit of fading in and out, and then use your light color, your metallic color to just sort of accentuate those dark pieces just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to focus primarily on the raised bits of these fans. I'm going to focus a little bit on this panel down here. Certainly this piece in right here can get a metallic shade around the control panel for sure, maybe some of the pipe works, and a little bit here primarily on the tips of the fan blades, and then maybe a little bit around the top or the opening. So I'll do that off camera. We'll come back with the next step, and that will involve a little bit more preparation before we get into the streaking grime. So stay tuned. Now ready to continue with the panel. What has happened since the last segment was we've gone ahead and done the stippling of both the anthracite gray as well as the steel. Again, I used a Vallejo Air for both of those just to keep them a little bit thinner. We did the sponge technique. In addition to that, what I did is I gave it an entire spray of matte sealer. So I used a Vallejo matte varnish for this. It's just a sealant coat, and one of the reasons that I do that is because we're going to start doing the streaking effects now. I want to make sure that when I'm using the white spirits, I'm not pulling off the rust or the undertones of the gray. So giving it a seal allows the streaking, the AK Interactive streaking products to sort of float on top of that matte sealer. And then what we're going to do is use the white spirits, and we're going to start pulling and diluting that down. So it's very, very subtle, but over here on the large fan panels here, or the exhaust ports rather, I've gone ahead and done the streaking in there already. So it's just very faint lines. You can see it here as well as here. And I'm just using, for that, I'm actually using something called streaking grime. This comes both in regular streaking grime as well as a dark streaking grime. I'm just using the regular one. Be very careful if you are ordering this. The dark looks like, let's see if I have it handy here. Here we go. It just literally says dark streaking grime, so they're very, very close in sort of product look, but one is clearly darker. This one here says it's for like dark yellow vehicles, and this one here says on the right says for dark green vehicles. You'll notice that we are not working on green surfaces at all, so just keep in mind that you can actually use it on a variety of surfaces. It's kind of toned to work best with those colors, those undertones rather. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in and add some streaking effects. So I'm going to work in a few different spots here. So I'm going to work primarily with the piping. So I'm going to just do some undertones of the streaking grime right in the underside here. It's going to add a shadow, and two, allow me to just sort of pull down and give some sort of character to this otherwise bland area here. So we'll see what that looks like, and then we'll kind of have a look and assess where we'd like to put some others. So let's get working. So I'm just going to turn this sideways just to kind of give you guys the best view. Like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and apply the product under this this pipe right here. It is put over here. Just going to give it a shake. I add ball bearings into all of the products just to allow them to stir up a little bit easier. Just make sure if you're doing that, you're going to get something. If you're going to use like your own sort of metallic items, just make sure that they don't have any interaction with the actual enamel, as well as make sure they don't rust, because you don't want to add any rust color unless it's actually to a rust product. Even that I would try to avoid. So I got lots in the lid here. I'm just going to grab this stuff here on the brush. I'm using a long bristle brush for this particular application because I want to make sure that I get up underneath here without getting on the pipe itself. If I do, it's fine, but so I'm just going to go ahead and just streak a little bit of that in here. Again, I can work over the rust that's already down there, and my hand may be in the way a little bit. My apologies, but sort of sporadically put it in there, there. Okay, and that's really all I need for the application of that. I'm just going to move that to the side. I'm just going to leave that set for a minute. It's not going to dry very quickly. I'm going to switch to a smaller bristle brush here, and now what we're going to do is, I'll show you on my hand kind of what we're going to do. Let me grab a little bit of that. So once we have, let's use my finger. Once we have applied the grime, what we're going to do is we're going to come in with the small brush and we're going to just pull it down in a streaking fashion. So we want to make sure that we streak the grime down, and you can see here on my finger how it kind of achieves that look. We're then going to take in the white spirits. We're going to saturate this to dilute that even more, and then we're going to continue with the pull, except this time we're going to really exaggerate the motions, and we're going to pull it as far down as we kind of feel that we need to. Obviously, you're going to allow the panel to dictate kind of where you want to go far and where you don't. So I have white spirits decanted into here, but first I'm just going to go in and grab a little bit of the streaking grime. Definitely got a nice streak going on there. It's a little bit easier to see from the sides. I still feel I want to have a bit more streaking going in there, so let's go back and work on this. And so you can see that, as I said, with most terrain making, don't try to do everything in a single step. So like I've come in here a few times, still not quite there with my streak. So I'm just going to exaggerate it a bit more. Come in. Flood it out, let the white spirits do the work, and then just start bringing it down. You just kind of keep building up, just building up your streaks. You basically put in your undertones, then you come in with your heavy streaks. So you can see now I've got the undertones, I've got that wash, see I've kind of really sort of darkened in that area, darkened in this area, darkened in this area. Well, now where I've got those dark patches, that's where I can really come in and start adding in those exaggerated streaks. The dark tones are there, so we've set the stage for the streaks. And again, this makes sense, right? It's right around kind of this coupling. You know, this is kind of on this pipe where this rust has come down in and formed. Here we're right around the other coupling. Here we're around the control mechanism. So now I'm just going to go in and flood my brush out, and then I'm going to go back in. I'm just going to pull those streaks down just a little bit. Let that flood over top. Let that flood over top. Flood over top, and again. Okay, we're just letting that flood down ever so slightly. And then our final time will come in and we'll just pull those down just a little bit more. Exaggerated streak. And it's okay to have a couple, you know, a couple defined lines in there. That's fine. You want to kind of have that. I'm even going to bring that streak just down a little bit onto that bottom panel. Bring that down. Bring that down. We got a really nice panel going there. Okay, so we're going to let all of that sort of dry up, and you know, we got these really sort of nasty pools in here. Darken panel, darken panel. So now we've broke up that, because when we started, that was really kind of evenly spread around there, that gray. So now we got some dark and light tinges amongst there. We got a little bit of you know, something going on right here. We got a recess panel here. In addition to, what I also did is I went out and I sort of brushed in a burnt iron over that, just a dry brush, as well as just these coils on here. I wanted to create a little bit of differentiation in these sort of column, or these couplings here. I did add some chipping in around there, but I didn't chip up the couplings here. I'm actually going to go in and soot mark those as if they're kind of like giving off some sort of emissions, and I just want to have a different little look there. So, but we're going to let this sort of dry out. The panel will dry once the white spirits is dry, and these will soften just a little bit. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to continue in. I'm going to do a little bit more streaking, especially up here in this exhaust port here. A little bit coming off down here, but I don't want to take away from the ooze that much. A little bit underneath the panel here, and like I said, I already have some there. And then down here, probably just a little bit here at the bottom. Don't want to really add too much streaking effects on the actual grade itself. So, okay guys, I know it's a bit of a longer step, but I just kind of wanted to walk you through how you need to build up to a final look, and you're not just going to go in and get everything done in a single stage. If you get it in a single stage, great, but if you don't quite achieve the look you're looking for, go back, keep working at it until you kind of get that desired look. So stay tuned for the next. So now that everything's had an opportunity to dry, you're going to see that we really have an overall changed tone in the panel. If you're really astute, you're going to notice that not only do we have the streaking effects, but we kind of have an overall greenish tinge added. And that's because I've actually went ahead and applied the AK Interactive Slimy Green. It's actually a dark slimy green. And this was super easy to apply. However, I had to flood the entire model, so I did that off camera so that I could come in and do the next part while it's dry. However, I will show you quickly what I did for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work in this sort of top portion right here. So again, turning it sideways so you guys can see. So this is a pretty easy step in terms of applying the sort of the wash. Now, unlike the other washes where you kind of have to do a sort of a reapplication and some precision work, this one's actually kind of, if I can use the terms, quick and dirty to do this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a sort of a bigger brush. You're going to take a little bit of your wash. In this case, I'm going to use I'm just going to use this top corner as mentioned, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply fairly generously some of the wash. So you can kind of see I'm just sort of applying it there in the corner. Now, let me just tip this back up for a second. You can see that that's significantly darker than any other portion, obviously, on the panel. So you're probably not going to want to leave it that bright, and so one of the disclaimers is you can actually do things however you like. So don't make me ever convince you that my way is the way to do it. You certainly can apply everything in the quantities that you like, do the dry times that you like, you know, any application technique. This is just only one method. This is not made to be an exhaustive tutorial on every possible way to do things. However, before it gets too dry, what you want to do is you want to take your white spirits again, and then I just dried off my brush. I'm going to come in now with the white spirits, and I'm actually going to flood this whole section with white spirits. So I'm significantly applying probably the largest quantity you've seen in this tutorial. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a foam piece, and this you're going to see it's quite large celled foam, so this is an example of something from a mini. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stipple over this corner, and I'm absorbing a fair bit of the green and the white spirits at the same time. However, I'm really diluting that out. So it is going to appear wet, but you're going to see that I've really created more of a subtle effect. Now it's a little wet, so it's going to look a little bit darker. That should dry out. And all you have to do is just kind of extend out as far as you like. And as you work your way out from the concentrated bits, it's going to dilute it and more, and you'll get a nice natural gradient. So I really actually just did that over the entire model, and I'll show you kind of while I have this up here. I did it here, here, up this side, this portion running down onto this, and then down this pipeworks, a little bit in here, as well as there. And with the streaking grime, what I did is you're going to notice I built up a little bit there just to kind of explain this, always kind of creating a narrative. So it came down, ran here, blah, blah, blah. Here it ran over a little bit here, a little bit down from this coupler here, a little bit from the handle, and then, as I said, it extends down there. You're also going to notice that I have added a little bit of the base colors into the panel. This panel is going to remain relatively dark. I have such a dark wall panel that I don't want to do any bright buttons or anything like that. Everything is going to be left dilapidated, no longer functioning, that sort of stuff. So I don't want to have anything bright or shiny here. What I will do though is I'll do a water effect treatment to this screen just to give it a little bit of the look that it has some translucency to it, and then what we'll do is we'll dust it to make it kind of dirty and grimy again. And then here obviously I've just put in the base color of dark green. We're going to kind of highlight this up to be more of a lime green, sort of toxic waste type sludge. So that'll be coming in the later steps. So what I wanted to do now is I just want to work really quickly on adding a bit more weathering pigments. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to add a little bit of pigment to here, as well as a little bit on the pipes. We're going to change the pipes into be a little bit more of a metallic pipe. However, for the purposes of this step, I'm just going to show you how to use the powders on this particular element here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some Vallejo pigments, and this is actually dark steel. So it's really cool. It's almost like pencil shaving filings. It's really hard to see. Let me decant a little bit into the lid here so you guys can get a little better sense. Hopefully that will show up. So it's quite dark, but it goes on with a metallic finish. So what we're going to do, again, just dusting off the brush. You notice that I don't often wash my brushes. I usually just clean them off with a paper towel really quickly. I don't mind if I'm kind of working with all sort of a similar palette. Everything sort of tends to lend with each color. There's nothing that's kind of a stark contrast. Another thing too is the white spirits evaporates so quickly, it often doesn't leave the brush very saturated. However, having a little bit of moisture in the brush for this application is not the end of the world. So what I'm going to do is I want to come in here and I want to just dust ever so slightly the grate. And I want to concentrate primarily in the middle. I don't want to go all the way to the edges because I want to use the natural shadow of the grate, at least on this top portion, to kind of emulate the fact that it's a little darker in there. So So I'm just lightly brushing this over. I should say too, I actually applied a black wash over this while the white spirits was drying before, just so that I could create a dark look to the recesses there. So that's just a standard black wash that I put in there. So nothing that was really that required any steps in the tutorial. Just go ahead and black out the back. So I'm just going back now. I'm just ever so slightly highlighting this up. And then that's going to give it, we're actually going to add some rust effects to this after, but what we're doing is we're just bringing this up, giving it a nice and bright look, so you can see that kind of, that metal looks really kind of achieved there. So what I'm going to do, maybe I'll just do this cog here for you. I'm going to go in, although it's got rust and stuff on it, I just want to start, and I'm not picking out the entirety of the handle, I'm actually just picking out just certain points here, a little bit on the coupling, and I'm just dusting ever so slightly along the pipe, mostly concentrating on the front facing edges. Just adding a little bit of the metallic look here and there. Anywhere I have a lot of rust, I'm just going to avoid those sections. Anywhere I have some nice exposed pipe, go ahead and just add a nice dusting in there. And that's just going to create a little bit of a contrast. Go, I'm just going to, there we go. Just gives us a little bit of a different look. You can see we're just kind of picking out a few elements here and there. We're going to go in and we're going to apply that dust effect here as well. We're also going to add some carbon soot to this later, but just adding a little bit of a highlight here to those sort of coils that are in there. There we go. So just a few teeny highlights here and there. You can certainly add it to the vents if you wanted to highlight this. I'm leaving this one particularly rusty, and I've already got some of the chrome look in here. It wouldn't probably hurt to go in and just sort of accentuate the chrome here. And in fact, this is a little bit darker than the aluminum or the steel rather that I used. So it's actually going to help dull that down a little bit. So I don't mind taking a little bit of the shine off that. And you can see there's not a lot of precision work in this. In fact, you want to avoid just putting stuff in one area. You want to maybe start in a particular zone to kind of target to your highlight points, but then you really want to work on transitioning out all your elements. So there we go. That's just simple, easy pigment application. We got the vent defined, a little bit of the coils, and then we've added some here in the venting. I'm going to continue on just with this, just hitting a few spots here and there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the second tone on the slime, and then we're going to come back in and we're going to do a little bit of moss effects actually on the pipes, because what we want to do is we want to add some water effect to that when we're all done, and then we're going to do some streaking water effect. We're going to do a little bit of leaking here and there, a few more streaks, and that will probably bring us pretty much to the close of this. So a few more steps, guys, to hang with it. Hopefully you're working on this with me and your stuff is looking as fine as you like. If it's not working perfectly, that's fine. Just keep at it. The white spirits and the ability to kind of flood and restart is a really nice sort of safety net with this sort of weathering application. So stay tuned for the next part, guys. Okay, so now we're at the conclusion of the build. So I've gone ahead and finished all of the final features, and there's a lot of kind of tidying aspects that I wanted to talk about. So rather than sort of illustrate those all on camera, I just wanted to talk about a few things that you can do to sort of finalize or finish up your build. So basically all along I've been talking about really being able to end your stages wherever you want. So I just added a couple final details and I wanted to kind of talk about those. So let's just kind of go around the entirety of the model. Obviously I've gone ahead in here and and finished up the sort of slime or ooze or whatever this substance is here kind of leaking out of this grate. The reason I went with green is I wanted a large color splash on here, so it's a very prominent piece. It stands out and the eye is sort of drawn to that. So does it have to be green? Absolutely not. You could certainly use whatever you wanted. In fact, I could have left it clear and made that just like a water sort of flow. Now, had I done that, I probably would have changed up the look a little bit. Obviously, it wouldn't be really thick and kind of thinning down. It would have been more of a consistent size, but nonetheless, you can really use whatever colors you want if you want to go ahead and add some splashes of color. I do highly recommend breaking up the monotony of the otherwise flat panel with at least some sort of color splash. So that's one of the features. Another feature that I did was added in this cobweb. If you notice the cobweb down here, I typically use cotton for that, although you can use nylon fibers. Some people like using nylon because they feel it sort of keeps its consistency a little bit better than cotton. I like cotton because I can actually flatten it out, and when I flatten it, it almost goes translucent, so you really can't see all of it. And for that, it's a pretty simple application. You just take some cotton, you tease out what you want. So for example, I would tease out this amount. Then what I recommend doing is I spin down one end just into a fine fiber. I typically will punch a hole through whatever I'm working on, put that through so that I have an anchor point, and then I just use tweezers or my fingers with a little bit of glue. In this case, I actually used a water effect in terms of the wetting liquid, and I just saturated this and then I just pressed it into the surface. When it is all dry, what you can do is you can go in with your tweezers and tease out. So although this looks a little bit dense and heavy, by the time I finished with this, I would tease it out so it would be very thin and sort of sparse looking, like this particular cobweb here. So it's a really cool effect. You can obviously stretch this over whatever substance you want. So I could have put it over, you know, this dial or this corner or this, you know, wherever you really want it. So that's just a quick, neat little trick that you can add a little bit of flavor or spice to your layouts. So what else did I do? It's a little bit difficult to see, but hopefully on camera you can see that this is a little bit wet here, and this is obviously dried now, but it's made to look like there's condensation forming. And how I did that was I used this material here called, or this substance I guess, called Wetting Effects Fluid by AK. You could also use still water by Vallejo or any other water product. I like this stuff because it's easy to brush on, and what I did with this is I brushed it onto the piping here, and then I left it dry to dry for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then what I did is I came back in with my sponge, and I used the sort of large cell sponge here, and I stippled all along there to kind of give it a rough surface. And so what it looks like is it looks like the pipe has been sweating. So the condensation sort of broke up. It's not a solid mass of water effect. So it's just a quick little neat trick that you can use to kind of sweat pipes or to create sort of a splash effect. And then to kind of give the illusion that it wasn't just sweating here, I actually went back in and I lightly tamped in or stippled in around, so above here and below there, just to give that wet look. And if I turn this slightly on camera, let me see if I can just play with the light a little bit. Hopefully you guys can kind of see that wet look that's showing up there, and I think that's coming out on the camera. So just in this region right here where my thumb is. So that's one of the final effects that I did. Additionally, what I did is I went in with a large sponge, and I just took some gray, light gray wash, as well as some neutral colored pigment. I call this neutral color because it's kind of a split between the bright sort of rust colors and the darker soot color that I used. So this is called natural umber. And what I did is I used these two substances here to just kind of mute a lot of the colors. So I stippled with a foam sponge all over the panel with the gray. Likewise, I took a large brush, and it looks like this, kind of like a blush brush for makeup, and I dusted the entirety of the model with the natural umber. And that just allowed me to sort of blend and mute a lot of the tones. So it took off the sharpness of some of the chrome or the what was that color exactly? Steel, sorry, the Vallejo steel. And it also brightened up a little bit of the dark tones that I had achieved with some of the black soot moss here. This is called carbon. and it just sort of helps to blend everything together. It takes a little bit of shine off the water effects, and overall it's a really nice finishing effect. So I highly recommend, if you kind of get to a stage where you're like, you're sort of done, but you're not quite finished and you don't know what it needs, sometimes those sort of neutral tones, just to blend it all together, are really a nice finishing effect. Additionally, what I did is I also added some moss deposits. So this is an AK Interactive enamel product, and what I did with this is I went into a few sections and I sort of just added in, much like I did with the rust wash, the light rust wash, and I just made sort of large patches. And then what I did is I went in afterwards, took some of the white spirits, again just kind of reminding you of all the products here. There we go, some of the white spirits, there we go. And I just sort of muted out by blending those moss deposits into the rest. Any of the excess I just stippled up just to kind of pull that saturation off of the surface itself. Finally, I should mention too that I also added a wetting effect to the slime, or this toxic waste, just to give it a little bit of a shine, take off the dullness of that. Obviously I wanted to make it look very fluid, and I just sort of added that on there for a little bit of added I guess it adds a little bit of action, a little bit of fluidity to an otherwise stale or stagnant looking feature. So I think that's really all I did on this, guys, to finish this off. It's kind of amazing. If I'm just going to pan the camera here real quick, if I can, just to kind of show you guys some of the products that we used on here. So if you just look there, we use not everything that's there, but a lot of those things were actually used on the build. So quite a lot of materials to get this done. Do you need all of them? Absolutely not. I'm just trying to give you a comprehensive rundown of things that you can use to sort of finish up or to add some cool effects to your otherwise maybe simple looking 3D prints or scratch build prints. So do you have to go this crazy on things? No. But does it look good in the end? Probably looks better than just a primer coat, and I think you would probably be in agreement with that. So that's going to conclude this tutorial. I do have a fig here for scales, just in case, because I realized I really didn't kind of properly show you guys what scale this was. So if I just tip that up there so it's a little bit more vertical, you can kind of see this is a Legion Mini here, obviously. Just kind of getting a sense of how tall these things are. So it's about probably 2.5 times a Legion Mini, and probably about, let me see here, I guess I got measurements on here. It's about 6 inches total, the panel width. So yeah, so that concludes that, guys. If you enjoyed the tutorial, I do recommend giving it a like if you want. If it's on YouTube and you're seeing this later, go ahead and subscribe if you're not already. This will be on Patreon, so they'll get it quite a bit earlier than everyone else, but I do appreciate the patrons' support. This is obviously what keeps these videos going, so please, any suggestions, recommendations, or questions, go ahead and fire those in the comments below. If you got any questions specific and you want an answer a little bit quicker, go ahead and fire me a message. I'm always eager to answer questions. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm Sean Morris from the Train Studio. Cheers.